I actually went to Romania not because of the Roma or Gypsies, but because I was beginning to put the Enlighten Foundation together, and I wanted to see how mission teams worked. I volunteered to go with the church mission team to work in an orphanage in Transylvania, Romania, and signed up to go through the 6-month training. We tried Romanian food, learned Romanian words, and we learned about Ceausescu and his horrifying regime and how he had starved his people. Ceausescu made women have many babies to populate the country so that they would grow, work in the cities, and make his country great. But parents couldn't support or keep their children because they couldn't feed them, and so they put them in orphanages. Hundreds of thousands of children were in orphanages. Just 18 years after Ceausescu and his family were killed, and just a handful of years after the 2020 show broke the news of the devastating conditions the children had been living in at the orphanages, we were going into Romania to give them a summer Bible school for a week. Each of us was given a translator. Mine was Simona Todinka, and she was a godsend to me. While we worked together, Simona described the conditions she lived in, that they were given 1 chicken a month, and each week they stood in line in the freezing cold to get 1 pitcher of milk a week. Her family's electricity was cut off every day, and she had to read her school books by candlelight or go out in a full moon and learn her lessons. Together, we were placed in a large old communist building, and the orphans were brought to us. Each of us on the team had 10 orphans to do crafts with, and it was really one of the longest weeks of my life. Interestingly enough, though, on the way to the orphanage, our team leader took us through a gypsy village called Perice. While the orphans lived a horrible life of abuse, the gypsies, or Roma, lived a life worse than dogs. I've been researching for several years how women under duress or in acute poverty survived. What were their first choices when they had nothing? What was the first priority in their lives? Did they have faith? If not, how would they look at life given their circumstances? My theory was that their first concern was for their children. Secondly, that they would always be concerned with their family's health. And third, that they would do anything for money to sustain their lives. Our team of American missionaries drove up to a small cinder block church in Perice. Dirt floors, no windows, a wooden altar in the front of the church, and a haphazard cross made of coat hangers attached some way on the roof. We filed in as the Roma women were on the left and the men were on the right. And the children just ran around without any pants on, just t-shirts, playing in the dirt, their heads shaved because of lice. The women sat quietly, wearing colorful scarves, and the men in their old shirts. How pompous were we standing in front? I thought we looked ridiculous. Our team leader wanted us to sing, and all I wanted to do was talk to them. I found out later that this is what people in acute poverty areas are willing to do. They come in and listen dutifully to some kind of message they don't really understand or care about, and then they get money. In this case, they got windows for their church. But in the middle of this scenario, a woman stood up and asked for prayer. "Pray for me," she said. "Pray for my children, that they can go to school, and my health. I am so sick. And help me, Lord, to find work so that I can eat." Well, I immediately awoke from my cynicism. There it was, proof of my theory. Right in that prayer. I loved that woman, and her name was Berta. I wanted to stay, but we had to leave. And we traveled to the orphanage and spent a week with rage-induced children, sucking on our skin, crying out all night, manically rocking back and forth. Day and night we worked with them. We were exhausted and starving. They fed us beans and hot water with a sprig of mint. This was a true test of how one survives in a very alien environment, one where you never felt comfortable, and one where it almost becomes survival of the fittest. Communication on the team completely broke down. People fought amongst themselves. Because we were stuck up in the hills, we couldn't get to any store. I couldn't wait to leave. I took notes the entire time, which eventually set up the Let's Go program. And I became fast friends with Simona, my translator. On the last day, the van that was to take us back into the city broke down. The only vehicle that was available was a truck, but no one knew how to drive it. I was so desperate I volunteered, and everyone got in, and I prayed my way down the mountain to get to Margita and switch to a van. I swore I would never go back. When I told the team leader that I would never return, he turned to me. "I saw your interest in those gypsies," he said. "They're worse off than these orphans. If you don't help them, who will?" Well, I just looked at him and told him to shut up. Of course, you know now that we did start a program in Parache. The next year I did go back, and I hired Simona to help me set up a trial run kindergarten to address the 3 issues Berta had prayed for. Berta and several of the Roma women were thrilled to have a little school in the church for their children. But the men were not so happy. They used their children to beg. School interfered with that. So 3 days into opening up the little school, our young teachers opened the door and in horror saw that the walls had been urinated on and the floors defecated on. They ran out crying and called me. I told them to call Berta and tell her that we would close the school in 2 days if that wasn't cleaned up. She cleaned it up and it opened again. That was in 2002. The Enlighten Foundation is the longest running nonprofit organization to work with Roma in Romania. Hundreds of stories have birthed in Romania. The trials and tribulations of the Romanians alone have been excruciating. The gypsies' existence has never reached the humane level. But Enlighten started a Project Sparkle early learning program there. And those children were able to learn to have fun and have fun learning. They were loved when no one else loved them. And they danced and sang and dressed up and colored. So much more is needed that it's overwhelming, but it's a start, and it's been our baseline gauge for other Enlighten learning centers from the moment we opened the doors. And of course, that is our mission. At Enlighten, we encourage and edify women worldwide to make transformational changes in their families, in their communities, and in the world. It's why we take our journey to understand others, become aware of issues women face, and to truly be ambassadors of Christ by stepping out and sharing the hope and the love of the Lord. Praise God.